my screen in a moment. And as mentioned, we distributed a survey to the Cumulus Association starting in April. I think there were a couple of reminders sent out, and today I'm just going to share the results. This was a survey that the X-Files board put together really about the university's different responses to COVID and their disruptions. We received a total of 29 responses, so it's not a huge sample size, but I think it's fairly diverse and interesting to see how people rated and ranked different things that we had in here. Just very briefly, out of the 29, I think the vast majority of titles held by individuals, which may be reflected by the membership of this group, were international coordinators, managers, officers, something like that. So there are 12 people with that title, 6 heads of office, 5 directors, 2 advisors, and 1 professor. Of course, that's not counting people who have dual roles or only reported one of them when completing the survey. As for locations of universities, perhaps unsurprisingly, Europe was the largest proportion. We had 23 individual responses from institutions in Europe. There were multiple responses from some schools, such as Kunstfach, and I believe well, at least one in France too, but 23 people from European institutions responded. We had 2 from South America, including 1 each from Chile and 1 from Ecuador, and then 4 from Asia, mostly from China, 1 from Macau. So that was the demographic of people who had submitted responses to the survey. I note here that I myself neglected to complete the survey as an American institution, so sorry about that, but I'd be interested to hear others' thoughts, because I think I've mentioned this a few times to my board member colleagues, but I feel as though the higher education system in America faces kind of its own set of challenges, that some of which may be slightly unique to American higher ed. So as of the distribution of the survey, mostly in April, it looked like the vast majority of us, 4/5, were teaching fully online. A much fewer number reported hybrid teaching, and I think only 1 member reported fully on-site teaching. That was at the University of Lapland, who hosted our Cumulus conference last year in northern Finland. As for modes of online instruction, Zoom, as we all know, for better or worse, is by far the most popular platform. Next up was Microsoft Teams, although I would say that's a very distant second compared to the number of people who use Zoom at their institutions. And then we have a scattering of platforms, including Moodle, Canvas, Google, WeChat, and then many, many other smaller proportions for combination of those platforms, or things like Basecamp, DingTalk, Skype, so obviously this shows that there's many different ways for us to stay connected in this period. And I think while having the wealth of options is very nice, it seems there's a clear, head of the pack here. So in terms of the biggest challenge with online instruction, a little more than half of respondents reported that adapting studio-based classroom activities was indeed the primary concern. And I think that's an ongoing topic of discussion for many of us with one another and also internally within our institutions. Other frequently cited challenges were student attendance or performance, familiarizing faculty members with new technologies, and then internet connectivity issues. It seems like these were the topics sort of at the front of mind. And, there are a couple of other individual responses, music teaching. One person said that the shift was pretty smooth. Seminars to educate staff and faculty about online teaching, and then just a little of everything. As for overall impact of COVID-19, again, 3/4 of us cited that the impact has been challenging. Smaller number said it was minimal, and a few people said it was severe, but for the most part, all of us experienced some form of disruption, or So as for the timeline of disruptions, again, a clear majority for most of us, this started in March, and for myself as well. Much of the US, including New York City, started going on lockdown around middle of March. Nobody reported April or May, so it seems like everyone had already begun experiencing the impact of COVID by this time. A smaller group reported disruptions in February and one in January. I imagine those might have been some of our colleagues in Chinese institutions. As for how long we anticipate COVID to disrupt our daily activity, a little less than half said that perhaps we might be ready to bounce back by summertime, which is right around the corner, really. July to August now feels incredibly imminent. Others, a few more were optimistic and said maybe spring, April through May. And then a couple also noted that maybe September to November, the fall semester, would be the time when things might slowly be returning to normal. And there's a fair mix of responses. I think the remaining ones are really looking at even longer timelines through the winter or through sometime next year, or some hybrid teaching in the fall that would alleviate some of the current issues. Student exchange and mobility. This one was pretty interesting because we have there's a division of responses here, unlike the other questions. So for the most part, actually, it looked like the 31% of respondents institutions were not decided about what to do with student exchange and mobility programs. I'm sure this would look a little bit different if we were to distribute the survey again today. About a quarter had temporarily suspended their activities. I know many partner institutions in Europe in particular had made that decision a long time ago. And then interesting still, about 1/5 of respondents noted that actually their student exchange programs were going to continue with no interruption. So, I mean, I'd be curious to hear from the group today if you have any feedback on what's happening in your school, or what your thinking is for the coming year and years. Finally, here we have the concern about COVID-19's impact on student enrollment, and it seems like 16 out of 29 respondents, so more than half, really were either concerned or very concerned. 10, I think, were in this neutral ground, but very few of us were not in some way thinking about what might happen to our institutions and student enrollment because of the coronavirus. Here, this question captured information on which populations at the institution, at your institution, have been impacted. And unsurprisingly, we have international students on mobility or exchange as the highest count, followed by conferences and public programs that were unable to take place, visiting professors, and then we move into a little bit of everyone else, recruitment, as in matriculated students from the international space, joint courses, collaborations with other schools, faculty recruitment, and so on. We have been adapting to the present challenges mostly through moving to a synchronous online format, as we are all doing right now. And then in some cases, depending on the nature of the program, it looks like our institutions have decided to postpone them. Some have decided to cancel them altogether. And then many more are still discussing or even considering moving to asynchronous online, so recording of videos and sharing of content that doesn't require all of us to be in a meeting room together. From here, I'm going to shift the last couple of questions, so I kind of summed them up on a different slideshow. So we had provided a couple different topics and asked the respondents to rank your interest in potentially, engaging with the X-Files group in a workshop or discussion. And with 5 as the ranking of very interested, we have these in descending order. So it seems like really perspectives on international exchange and partnerships in the post-COVID world, given the makeup of the X-Files group and our roles at the institution, this was definitely the highest, most highly ranked discussion topic that survey respondents would like to engage with us about. And then we have how to stay engaged with the international community. during the pandemic, including mobility students, faculty, partner institutions. A little bit lower than that was how the COVID-19 crisis is affecting daily life at universities, tips and best practices. And perhaps, again, due to the makeup of the group, this one, the challenges and opportunities online teaching, was lower on the list. We also invited respondents to provide their own topics or suggest their own topics for our conversation. So this is just a collation of some of those ideas. People had suggested we could talk about renewal of Erasmus Plus agreements and best practices, government policies' impact on international engagement of universities, the future of Cumulus and X-Files, especially regarding the frequency of the conference, and since we're piloting this digital mode of engagement this year, which I think overall has worked out very, very nicely for most of us. This one is very interesting, how there might be resistance to or acceptance of the new normal at our institutions, both on the administrative side and in teaching. International online collaboration, new partnership schemes blending online and in-person engagement, how our BA and MA diplomas and examinations being organized virtually at this point, and then new teaching protocols for on-site classes. So that's what I wanted to share with you all today. We don't have a lot of time remaining, but I would love to hear comments from anybody in the next couple of minutes or so, or questions, other feedback that you'd like to provide. Thank you.